Delighted to welcome for a preview of this Sunday night Super Bowl, Mike Carlson. Morning, Mike. How are things?
Morning. I thought I'd tuned into a travel show there.
Yeah, what are your Arizona recommendations?
I mean, Glendale and Phoenix is a small center of town with a large collection of big suburbs, sort of, and that's what Glendale and Scottsdale are.
Right.
And I was just thinking when they were talking about the fans and the beer, if this was the NFL, they would have like the PGA skills competition, and they'd get three fans out there and put their beer cups on the green, and then have the guys try to chip the ball into the beer cup.
Yeah, just to add an extra element to it. I was doing my research during the week. Glendale, Arizona, founded by William John Murphy from New Hartford, New York, but his two parents emigrated from County Antrim in Ireland. So
nice.
There you go.
We always find a link somewhere to the Super Bowl.
I stayed in New Hartford, New York one time.
Well, there you go.
It's in the Utica, Clinton area. Yeah, I was teaching there.
Brilliant.
It's strange.
We should do a travel slot with you at some point, Mike. But I guess this morning.
Every week. Give me a date. We'll do
exactly.
it every week for a couple of years.
Well, we'll focus on the action at Glendale for this Sunday night. We've got the Kansas City Chiefs against the Philadelphia Eagles. A lot of the build-up is centred around one man's ankle. Patrick Mahomes, how crucial is it that he's mobile, he's able to move? I guess for good reason. A lot of the build-up has been around Mahomes and his injury and how he's holding up.
Yeah, strangely enough, there should be almost as much concern about Jalen Hurts' injury on the opposite quarterback. But for Mahomes, given how he played against Cincinnati, it was called a high ankle sprain, but he played against Cincinnati 2 weeks ago as if it were a kind of minor sprain. He wasn't fully mobile, but he wasn't sort of favoring limping too much, although as the game went on, it got worse. So obviously the painkiller or whatever they gave him was what was wearing off. I'm pretty much convinced that after 2 weeks of rest, now he should be pretty much back to 100%. And why it's so important for Kansas City is that Philadelphia has the best pass rush in the league. They had 70 sacks during the season, which was, I think, the third best total ever. And they do it because their front four defensive linemen is so strong, and they rotate about 9 different guys through there. But they have the two tackles. All of their tackles who play inside are big. One of them, John Hargreave, is very quick as well. But they put lots of pressure up the middle, which is most quarterbacks, including Mahomes. That's their first kind of, when they feel pressure, it usually comes from the outside, and their first instinct is to step forward in the pocket, just to climb the pocket a little bit and make a little more time for themselves. But of course, if the middle of your pocket is collapsing, then that becomes a problem. And then because of these big guys inside, the two ends for the Eagles, and again, there's a rotation, but that gives them a lot of freedom to move out wide and rush, try to isolate the tackles. And the tackles are the weaker part of Kansas City's line. The center is the inside three are the stronger part. And if you were watching the conference championship games against the Giants, Hassan Reddick, who is a defensive end, plays kind of like an outside linebacker, the same thing, but he had a brilliant game against them, and he's a quality pass rusher. So he would kind of be the guy they'll really want to be paying attention to. But that whole line is so good that you can't really try to double people on a regular basis, because even when you're playing 5-on-4, they're good enough to beat you without adding extra pass rushers.
And Mike, do we know if Patrick Mahomes has been training, or is he getting much resting? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, just at the beginning of last week, they made a big deal about bringing him out at practice and showing him moving around fairly well and not walking in a boot or anything like that. So he's listed as full participation. The only real injury question for Kansas City is Kadarius Toney, who is important to the team because they lack, since Tyreek Hill left last season, they lack an explosive player who can make things happen, which is what Toney is. And the Giants didn't quite know how to use him, and also he can't stay on the field. It's been his problem since he joined the NFL. But Jalen Hurts, the Eagles quarterback, has an injured shoulder, and we don't really know the extent of the injury. He suffered it toward the end of the season. They gave Gardner Minshew 2 starts at the end of the season. It's a combination now of based on what we saw against the Giants, of injury and or rustiness. His passing was off, and they weren't running him very much. And the key to their offense is that Jalen Hurts is probably as good a runner as anybody on the team. And when you run your quarterback, you add an extra blocker to the equation, because normally when you hand the ball to a running back, the quarterback is now out of the play. So you're playing with 9 against 11. If the quarterback is carrying the ball himself, you're playing 10 against 11. And the threat of his running means that both the Kansas City pass rush will be a little more contained, because they have to make sure they don't let him get outside of the pass rush. And also that their running game opens up a little bit, because you have to watch Hurts. And therefore that gives the running backs more room. The Hurts and Miles Sanders, their top running back, had the 2 best yards per carry averages in the league. So it's a dangerous running attack.
Mike, I guess for any franchise coming into a Super Bowl, you want to have been relatively tested coming into it. The Eagles, when you look at their playoffs, so they had the bye, the divisional round game against, as you mentioned, the Giants, who were overmatched a little bit, and then the championship game against the 49ers, who of course had their quarterback difficulties. I think they've only conceded a combined 14 points in the playoffs, the Eagles. Is there any concern there that there's a feeling that maybe they haven't been properly tested coming into Sunday?
It's a good question, and it's a hard one to answer, in the sense that they're a very good team and they played well all season. But when you go back over the season, they had a lot of quarterback luck, not just Brock Purdy in the conference game, but when they played Dallas down in Dallas, it was Cooper Rush at quarterback. They faced backup quarterbacks, or not very good ones, in a number of games. You only can play who you're scheduled to play, so that's part of the problem. But there's no doubt that they have the best offensive line in the league. They have one of the best defensive lines in the league. They're probably in total stronger than Kansas City in those factors. They have 2 really good receivers, probably better than any of Kansas City's receivers. They've got a group of decent running backs. Sanders is very good. So the question really is Jalen Hurts well enough to make that offense function on all cylinders, which makes it a very difficult one to defend? And is Mahomes good enough to create the way out of the schemes that they run, to create points against that Kansas City defense? In a sense, it's kind of like when Philadelphia played New England in the Super Bowl in 2018 season. And New England was favored, and I kept saying to the guys I was working with, it's weird they're favored because Philadelphia is the better team. But of course, Philadelphia had a backup quarterback in Nick Foles, and New England had Tom Brady, and Tom Brady's Tom Brady. And we sort of feel now the same way. Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes.
It's the perennial question, Mike, but for any team lining out against the Kansas City Chiefs. But how do you stop Travis Kelce? Because, I mean, as tight ends go, he's in the Rob Gronkowski mould. Not an easy task, but it's probably the best defense he'll come up against all season.
Yeah, and it's basically, up until this season, you didn't stop Travis Kelce, you stopped Tyreek Hill first. That was your first concern. So Kelce got a lot underneath. And the feeling was that everyone knew that Kelce was their best weapon, so he would be facing the double teams this year and people trying to stop him. And what you try to do is control him, not let him beat you with big plays. Try to hold down the chunk plays. And he's not quite the deep threat that Gronk, when he was in his prime, was, or that George Kittle is, in terms of running fast down the seam, down the middle of the field. But he and Mahomes have such a good rapport, and he's so smart that they scheme a lot. Philadelphia's passing attack is much simpler in concept than Kansas City's, and Kansas City's runs players at all levels, trying to get Kelce open in particular, or trying to get somebody else, or create situations where the defenders have to choose between Kelce and either a back in the flat in front of him or someone behind him, try to make those openings. And because he and Mahomes have such a great understanding, and Mahomes sees the field so well and anticipates so well, routes that are what we would call option routes, where if you're facing a zone defense, you would run one way, and if you're facing a man defense, you would run a different kind of pattern. He and Mahomes know that. So he'll break that off to move to a spot where he sees that there's more space or opens up more space. And Mahomes will anticipate that. And that's what makes him so hard to defend. The Eagles have a good secondary, and they play mostly zone, and they play mostly to contain. So usually two deep safeties, which means nothing gets by them. They're trying not to let anything get behind them, keep everything in front. And what that concept is you're trying to make the other team beat you by consistently executing their plays and hoping or expecting that sooner or later you'll break one that gives you a not a turnover, but say a situation where you then know they're going to pass and you can release your pass rush without having to worry too much about it. And that's going to be an interesting situation for the Eagles. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, I think, is probably going to be a key in that because he's the flexible guy in their secondary who can do almost anything. He can come up and play in the box like a linebacker. He can cover a tight end. He can cover a wide receiver. So you might see a little more man than you would expect from them, or possibly one man on him, and then the rest of the secondary is playing zone, and that could be a way to stop him. And then you have to you don't worry so much about Marquez Valdez-Scantling or Juju Smith-Schuster as you do about A.J. Brown or Devonta Smith, the two wide receivers for Philadelphia. They're not quite the kind of guys who beat you individually the way they do. But if Andy can sneak them open, as a result of the concentration on Kelce, that's where Kansas City's offense could really thrive.
Penny for the thoughts of Donna Kelce and the Kelce family as they watch two brothers go up against each other.
Mrs. Kelce's got a tough job there.
I'd love to know who they're supporting. I mean, it's between that and then the fact that it's the first time two black quarterbacks have ever been starting against each other in a Super Bowl. Quite a historic Super Bowl, Mike, from a number of perspectives.
Yeah, I always go back to the first black quarterback to start a Super Bowl was Doug Williams, who was playing for Washington then, and at the press day, the very first question that he was asked by a reporter was, Doug, how long have you been a black quarterback?
Jeez.
Well, so we've moved on from those days.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it's interesting because it's part of the young breed of quarterbacks and the changing nature of the NFL, which is in some ways reflecting college game as offenses have opened up, and the game has become more of a mismatch kind of 7-on-7 battle, between Mahomes is a rare talent. He's got that kind of natural athleticism that you would see in great scrum halves or fly halves or midfielders, passing midfielders or point guards in basketball. He's got that ability, that vision to see the field, to be able to anticipate what it's going to look like a second later than what he's seeing. So he doesn't have to wait for a receiver to get open. He can throw to the spot where he knows the receiver is going to be or anticipates it. And then his father was a Major League Baseball pitcher. He's got a tremendous arm, and we've seen, he can throw it not just overarm like players usually do, but underarm, left-handed, back behind his back. So he's a rare talent. And Hurts is, to me, the biggest story with the Eagles, who are a tremendously well-built team by the GM, Howie Roseman, who basically learned his trade under Andy Reid when Reid was in Philadelphia. They've built depth into that team. They've gone out and got what they needed to improve them. And that big decision last year was whether they would stick with Jalen Hurts as their starting quarterback. And Hurts was looked at as one of these guys who runs really well, but maybe he's going to be a liability in the pass game. And they decided, no, he's not. We've seen what he did in college, but what we have to do is to create an offense that makes it easier for him not to be alive, that plays to his strengths. And they went out and got A.J. Brown, who from Tennessee, in a trade at the beginning of the season. He's worked out really well for them. They drafted Devonta Smith, who's a great all-around receiver. These two guys are both quality players, and you can throw them the ball in 50-50 situations and be pretty sure that they're going to come up and with wins in those situations. And that's why the shoulder injury to Hurts is so important, because if he's not really 100%, and we saw in the championship game, his balls looked like they were sailing a bit when he threw long, and they didn't run him that much. They didn't really have to in most of the game. But, those are the two questions. Do they dare to run him and risk the shoulder injury, which my answer would probably be yes, because it's the last game of the season and it's the biggest one he'll ever play. And is his passing going to be as good as it was earlier in the season before he hurt the shoulder? And again, my guess is that it probably will be that whatever combination of rust and injury that will have worn off for this game. But that to me is really the key to how Philadelphia's offense is going to play.
Yeah, it feels like the telling factor here is the injuries and how players are going to be come the day. But when you look at the Chiefs, the experience they've had in the Super Bowl, the third time in 4 years, you would think that that will stand to them.
It might do. It's funny because Andy Reid's legacy in Philadelphia was he produced consistently good teams. He got to the playoffs most years. He won the division quite frequently, but he only got to one Super Bowl, which they lost. And then he left, and Doug Peterson coached the team to a Super Bowl. And Reid now and Mahomes have gotten great success in the last 4 years, but only, and I put only in quotation marks, one Super Bowl win. So in a sense, that is going to be, is Andy Reid's legacy going to be that he's always the bridesmaid and rarely the bride? I think that's something that I doubt bothers them, and I think they draw on the experience that they had. But they're still, like I say, they're always rebuilding. They're a young team. There's no Tyreek Hill on this team. In the conference championship, they had to start 3 rookie cornerbacks. So their secondary was 3/5 rookies, and none of them were kind of like star. Well, one is kind of a first round pick, but the others are not star rookies who are expected to step right in to the lineup. And so that's going to be a challenge for them. They're constantly in flux. And what's interesting to me is that there are still, I think, 3 guys left. There's only 3 guys left on the Eagles team from their Super Bowl win over New England. And they were sort of all products of the Reid era. Kelce's one of them, and Lane Johnson's another. And I'm trying to think in my mind desperately who the third one is. But
that's almost impressive in itself, Mike. As Ashley mentions, like the Chiefs have been here, done that, but that Eagles team that won the Super Bowl 5 years ago, it's essentially completely different, especially when you have a different quarterback and head coach combo with Hurts and Sirianni. How did they manage to rebuild the team so quickly?
Well, that's Howie Roseman, and like I said, after Reid left, the team fired him, and he kind of lost a power struggle within the front office. And then they brought him back, and then they finally promoted him back to general manager. And he's done an amazing job of building both a very good team and a lot of quality depth and going out after plays. And this could be their shot, because a lot of their their contracts are ending, and they're going to have problems at the end of the season deciding who gets paid and who's got to move on, and if their depth, is enough. But he's still got a couple of first-round draft picks in the next draft lined up, so they'll have a little bit of chance there. Whereas that Chiefs team is a younger team. For all the experience, they're actually a younger team, and still growing into their roles. And I think it's another one of these balances. And this really is as balanced a Super Bowl as I can remember. When the conference championship games ended and the line came out and Kansas City were favorite, and then it switched back to Philadelphia, and then Mahomes, showed that he could kind of move around, and it moved a little bit now, but it's sitting with Philadelphia giving 1.5 points. So the Kansas City are slight underdogs, and I wouldn't be surprised if by Sunday it was a pick-em game, and no one's getting any points. Just take who you think is going to win, and it's that classic thing. I think Philadelphia is probably the better team, and I think Philadelphia doesn't have a Mahomes. He's the best quarterback in the league. They've got the better defensive line, but they don't have a Chris Jones, who's maybe one of the 2 or 3 best defensive linemen in the league, and they don't have a Travis Kelce. But Dallas Goedert is a pretty good tight end. He's probably the 4th or 5th best tight end in the league. So it's like how much faith you have in Patrick Mahomes, and that's the way you're going to go.
So finally, Mike, who's going to win by how much? And also, Rihanna halftime show You looking forward to that? I don't know how many Rihanna songs you can name. Please Don't Stop the Music apparently is the bookies' favourite for the first song, and Umbrella for the last song.
Yeah, what's the one with BH in the title?
Many of them.
Yeah, there's a few of them. I think Stays is another song that's going to be used.
Super Bowl halftime shows have passed me by.
Right, fair.
You want a definition of me? It's the headlines in the Daily Mail 2 days ago when it said that unknown blues singer Bonnie Raitt had taken the Emmy away from the Grammy away from Beyonce, and I'm thinking unknown. She got a Lifetime Achievement Award last year.
Yeah.
It's like, are they really that? But anyway, I'm just a curmudgeon in those ways. I have a problem in picking this game simply that I can't do my usual hemming and hawing because I picked the Chiefs at the beginning of the season to win the Super Bowl. So I'm kind of locked into that. I mean, I could be very clever and pick the Eagles, and then I could say afterwards, well, I picked the Eagles, and someone said, no, you didn't. I said, well, yeah, I picked the Chiefs at the beginning of the season. So I'm going to go with the Chiefs. But like I said, it's really a toss-up. It's how much you think Mahomes can carry that team against a team that's stronger up front. The old adage is that offense gets you to championships and defense wins championships. In which case you would probably like the Eagles. And if you're an Eagles fan, you're probably anticipating that the city of Philadelphia is going out and greasing all of the lamp poles in Philadelphia on Sunday to make sure that the fans can't climb them and then destroy them.
Absolutely. And maybe the Empire State Building will light up in the colours of the Eagles.
What a great city.
Yeah, fantastic. Mike, great stuff. So Sunday night, Glendale, Arizona, Philadelphia Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs. Enjoy the match, and thanks as always for joining us.
Thanks, guys.